During the Antebellum era in Southern America, life was marked by stark contrasts. Wealthy households, with their grand facades and manicured lawns, masked a more complex reality beneath. In these households, there were not only societal expectations for white women, but also rigid rules that dictated every aspect of their lives. These women were often confined to roles defined by their husbands, society, and cultural norms. While on the surface, they appeared to lead lives of comfort. Beneath that surface was a sense of restraint, an unspoken frustration with the roles that society imposed upon them. One night, a southern white woman, frustrated and restless, found herself preparing for a secretive venture. She carefully selected a plain, unremarkable dress that she hadn't worn in years. She knew the risks. She knew the boundaries she was about to cross. With her husband fast asleep and the household in silence, she checked on her children one last time before quietly slipping out of the house. It was an act of rebellion, yet one that had to be carried out. But where was she heading? The answer lies in a hidden aspect of antebellum society. Secret brothels that existed on the fringes of southern towns. These establishments were not the usual brothels known for the exploitation of enslaved women by white men. Instead, they catered to a different, more concealed clientele, wealthy white women seeking forbidden interactions with enslaved black men. These hidden spaces allowed these women to momentarily escape the suffocating roles they were confined to, even if it meant engaging in morally questionable behavior. The existence of these brothels reveals the complex and dark dynamics of race, gender, and power in the South during this era. These places operated under a veil of secrecy, hidden in remote areas or concealed within backrooms of seemingly ordinary establishments. The risk of exposure was immense, as interracial relationships were not only socially taboo, but also illegal in many parts of the South. The consequences for both parties, if discovered, could be catastrophic, ranging from social ostracism to violent retribution. This reality forced these establishments to prioritize secrecy above all else, often involving a network of individuals who ensured that these encounters remained undetected. In these shadowy corners, wealthy white women exercised a form of power they were otherwise denied in society. Here, they temporarily stepped out of the roles that confined them, using their influence over those who had no choice but to comply. The enslaved men, coerced into these encounters, faced an unimaginable dilemma. Resistance could mean severe punishment or even death, while compliance meant enduring acts that reinforced their subjugation. These interactions were not just about physical satisfaction. They were a twisted reflection of the broader societal power dynamics. White women, who were themselves subjugated under patriarchy, found a disturbing sense of control in these encounters, albeit at the expense of individuals already suffering under brutal racial oppression. These brothels functioned as a disturbing intersection of race, gender, and power. They were hidden behind layers of deception, and few records of their existence remain. Historical accounts, such as They Were Her Property by Stephanie Jones Rogers, offer a glimpse into how white women exercised control over enslaved men in ways that were both deeply personal and deeply exploitative. Meanwhile, works like Sexual Politics of the Slave Trade, History and Legacy by April D. DeConnick provide broader insights into how power dynamics and sexual politics played out within the institution of slavery. The societal taboo against interracial relationships, especially those initiated by white women, was profoundly strong during this period. Publicly, white women were expected to be paragons of virtue, embodying ideals of purity and moral uprightness. The idea of a white woman engaging in a relationship with a black man was not only considered scandalous, but also a violation of the social order. For these women, the clandestine nature of the brothels offered a rare opportunity to act outside the restrictive boundaries set by society. These encounters, however, were not driven solely by personal desires. They were deeply entwined with the broader themes of control and dominance. As these women entered the concealed rooms of the brothels, they crossed a forbidden threshold, one where societal rules were momentarily suspended. Yet, the power dynamics within these spaces were far from equal. While the women were seeking a temporary sense of escape, the enslaved men had no choice in their participation. The interactions were marked by coercion, as the men were forced to comply with the demands of their captors. For the women, these encounters represented a chance to assert control in a society that largely denied them agency. For the men, it was a reminder of the brutal and inescapable reality of their oppression. It's crucial to approach this part of history with sensitivity, acknowledging the complexity of the individuals involved while not excusing the exploitation that occurred. These hidden brothels were not merely places of indulgence, but were manifestations of the broader racial and sexual politics of the time. They exemplified how deeply entrenched power structures could manifest in even the most intimate aspects of life. While the existence of such brothels is a lesser-known aspect of history, it sheds light on the complexities of human behavior under oppressive systems. It also highlights the ways in which power dynamics can be both pervasive and deeply personal. As we explore this history, it is important to remember that the individuals involved were products of a time marked by extreme inequalities and moral contradictions. If you are interested in delving deeper into this complex chapter of American history, I encourage you to read more about the intersection of race, gender, and power during the Antebellum period. Books such as Race and Sexual Power in Early America by Jennifer L. Morgan and They Were Her Property by Stephanie Jones Rogers provide detailed insights into the roles of women and the sexual politics of slavery. Thank you for watching, and please support our channel by subscribing and liking this video. Your engagement helps us bring more historical content to life and build a community dedicated to understanding history with depth and sensitivity. In the southern United States, during the antebellum period, society was governed by strict racial and social hierarchies that were enforced both publicly and privately. The lives of women, especially those of higher social status, were defined by rigid expectations. These women were often bound by their roles as wives, mothers, and upholders of the social order. While society emphasized their modesty and chastity, their personal desires were often repressed, and their roles within the family were largely subservient. Yet, beneath the surface of this societal facade, there existed a hidden network of establishments that catered to a select group of white women seeking to escape the confines of their daily lives. These secretive brothels, often located in remote areas or concealed within the basements of discreet buildings, catered to wealthy white women who were often trapped in loveless or sexually unfulfilling marriages. For many of these women, visiting these brothels was not merely an act of rebellion, but an attempt to reclaim a sense of agency over their lives and desires. The act of engaging in such forbidden encounters, however, was deeply complex and marked by significant ethical dilemmas. These women temporarily broke free from societal norms by stepping into spaces where the rules of the outside world were suspended, if only momentarily. The racial dynamics within these brothels were highly intricate. In a society where interracial relationships were strictly forbidden and even criminalized, the act of a white woman engaging in a relationship with an enslaved black man was not just a breach of social norms, but also a violation of the laws that governed Southern society. Yet within these hidden brothels, the racial hierarchies of the time were both challenged and reinforced. The white women who visited these establishments wielded power in these encounters, but the enslaved men involved were stripped of any semblance of agency or autonomy. The power dynamics were always one-sided, as the enslaved men were coerced into compliance under the threat of severe punishment or even death. Many of these enslaved men were selected based on their physical attributes, such as strength, youth, and perceived sexual virility. Once chosen, they were subjected to repeated exploitation without any hope of escape or legal recourse. The psychological toll of these encounters was immense, as these men were forced to endure acts that were both physically and emotionally devastating. The fact that this aspect of history is less discussed is a reflection of the broader discomfort society feels when confronted with the uncomfortable truths of racial and sexual exploitation. The women who visited these brothels often came from the upper echelons of Southern society. These women were used to wielding power in their social circles, but their power was still limited by their gender. In the brothels, however, they experienced a different kind of control. Here, they could act upon desires that were otherwise suppressed, choosing enslaved men as a means to assert dominance and fulfill forbidden fantasies. While these encounters provided temporary relief from the constraints of their daily lives, they were grounded in a deeply exploitative system. The very act of selecting an enslaved man for sexual purposes was an assertion of racial superiority, even as it challenged the gender norms of the time. The existence of these brothels underscores the contradictions of the antebellum South. Publicly, the strict enforcement of racial segregation was the norm, but in private, these boundaries could be bent or broken under the cover of secrecy. The brothels served as places where societal rules were momentarily suspended, but the racial and social hierarchies were still present. The interactions within these spaces were not about equality. They were a stark reminder of the pervasive racial inequalities that defined the era. In the shadowy depths of antebellum Southern society, a hidden world thrived, one that was carefully concealed from the public, yet entangled in the very fabric of the era's complex social structures. This world was marked by the existence of brothels that catered to the secret desires of white women, often from influential families. The owners of these establishments were frequently white women themselves, many of whom were widowed or had been abandoned by their husbands. Operating discreetly, these brothels provided a secretive refuge where societal norms were momentarily set aside. These brothels were not merely places of forbidden encounters. They were arenas of power where racial and gender dynamics intersected in deeply unsettling ways. The clientele, white women often bound by strict social expectations, were drawn to these secret establishments as a means of breaking free from the constraints imposed upon them. Many of these women had grown weary of their roles as dutiful wives and mothers, roles that demanded purity and submissiveness. Within the confines of these hidden spaces, they could momentarily cast aside these expectations, engaging in interactions that were otherwise unthinkable in their public lives. The enslaved men forced into these roles faced unimaginable hardships. Selected based on physical strength, youth, and perceived attractiveness, they were coerced into situations where their very existence was defined by fear and subjugation. The power dynamics in these brothels were starkly one-sided, as the white women exercised complete control over the encounters. While these women viewed the brothels as a means of asserting power or rebelling against gender norms, the reality for the enslaved men was one of constant danger and dehumanization. The brothels operated through an intricate clandestine network, with slave traders playing a crucial role in supplying enslaved men. The transactions were conducted discreetly, with significant financial incentives ensuring the ongoing supply of desirable men. The demand for these services was high, driven by wealthy white women seeking to assert control in a society that generally denied them agency. For the enslaved men, however, the brothels were sites of intense trauma, where they were forced to endure repeated exploitation. Inside these brothels, the interactions were not simply about fulfilling forbidden desires. They were deeply rooted in the racial hierarchies of the time. The white women involved were often well aware of the implications of their actions. In a society where white supremacy was strictly enforced, their participation in these secret encounters reinforced the broader system of racial dominance. While the encounters allowed them to temporarily escape their own societal confines, they did so at the expense of individuals who were already subjected to brutal oppression. Historical records of these brothels are sparse, as the establishments were designed to be hidden from the public eye. What is known comes from fragmented accounts and oral histories, offering a glimpse into the darker side of Southern society. Books like They Were Her Property by Stephanie Jones Rogers and Sexual Politics of the Slave Trade, History and Legacy by April D. DeConnick provide valuable insights into the complex dynamics of race, gender, and power during this period. These works delve into the broader implications of sexual exploitation within the context of slavery, highlighting how power dynamics were both enforced and subverted in private spaces. For the enslaved men, these brothels represented one of the most degrading aspects of slavery. They were not only stripped, of their freedom, but also subjected to intimate violations that left lasting scars, both physical and psychological. The process was often dehumanizing, as these men were paraded before the white women, who inspected and selected them based on appearance. The encounters that followed were marked by violence, coercion, and a complete lack of autonomy for the enslaved men. The trauma of these experiences was compounded by the fact that the men had no means of escape or legal recourse. The existence of these brothels underscores the contradictions of antebellum Southern society. While strict racial segregation was enforced in public, the boundaries were occasionally bent or broken in private, albeit under a cloak of secrecy. The brothels served as sites where societal rules could be temporarily disregarded, but they were also places where racial hierarchies remained firmly in place. The interactions within these spaces were not just about rebellion against gender norms. They were also expressions of racial dominance, with the enslaved men being the most vulnerable victims of this twisted power dynamic. The owners of these brothels were often women who had experienced a loss of status due to widowhood or abandonment. Operating these establishments was both a means of survival and a way to wield power in a male-dominated society. However, their control came at a grave cost, as they exploited the bodies and labor of enslaved men for personal gain. The brothels operated with extreme secrecy, as any exposure could have led to severe repercussions for both the owners and the clientele. The white women who frequented these establishments were often from influential families, making discretion a top priority. The broader implications of these brothels highlight the complex ways in which power was wielded in the antebellum South. For the white women involved, visiting these brothels provided a temporary sense of agency in a society that largely restricted their autonomy. However, this agency was built on the backs of enslaved individuals who had no choice but to comply with the demands placed upon them. The encounters were often framed as acts of rebellion against the constraints of womanhood, but they were deeply intertwined with the racial hierarchies that defined the era. While these brothels allowed white women to explore desires that were otherwise repressed, they did so in a manner that reinforced the broader system of racial subjugation. The very act of selecting an enslaved man for personal gratification was a demonstration of racial power, even as it challenged gender norms. The interactions were marked by a deep sense of contradiction, as the women temporarily escaped their roles while the enslaved men were forced to endure further degradation. For historians, the study of these brothels offers insights into the intersections of race, gender, and power during the antebellum period. The existence of such establishments reveals the complexities of human behavior under systems of oppression, where even acts of rebellion could simultaneously serve as acts of dominance. The stories of the enslaved men who were forced into these roles are often overlooked, but they are essential to understanding the full scope of slavery's impact on American society. As we continue to uncover this hidden chapter of history, it is important to approach it with sensitivity and a commitment to understanding the complexities of the time. The brothels were not simply places of forbidden pleasure. They were manifestations of a broader system of racial and gender-based exploitation. The experiences of the enslaved men, though often shrouded in silence, are a testament to the enduring human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. If you are interested in learning more about this chapter of American history, I encourage you to explore the works of scholars who have dedicated themselves to uncovering these hidden narratives. Books like Race and Sexual Power in Early America by Jennifer L. Morgan and They Were Her Property by Stephanie Jones Rogers offer a deeper understanding of the dynamics at play during this complex period. By studying these works, we can gain a more nuanced understanding of the ways in which power was both wielded and contested in the antebellum South. It is important to approach this aspect of history with sensitivity and a commitment to understanding the full scope of human behavior under oppressive systems. While these brothels provided white women with a sense of temporary power, they did so at the expense of individuals who were already suffering under brutal conditions. The existence of such establishments serves as a reminder of the complexities of race, gender, and power in the antebellum South. It also underscores the need for a deeper examination of the ways in which societal norms can be both upheld and broken in private, even as they are enforced in public. As we continue to uncover and understand this dark chapter of history, it is essential to remember the individuals who were affected by these exploitative practices. The stories of these enslaved men, although often hidden or overlooked, are critical to understanding the broader context of slavery and its lasting impact on American society. If you want to learn more about the complex dynamics of race, gender, and power during this period, I encourage you to explore academic works that delve into this subject with depth and sensitivity. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it informative, please support our channel by subscribing and clicking the bell icon. Your engagement helps us bring more historical content to a wider audience, fostering a better understanding of history's complexities.